to observe this in action.
See it?
Yeah.
It can be time consuming sometimes. But so I was walking through the store and I get this flash image of what I think is a boxer, a dog. It's like a boxer. It actually wasn't a boxer, but that's what I was thinking at the time. And so I'm walking through the store and I'm like, okay, who are you trying to show me? Because I realized it was him, or at least I thought it was him. And I'd been asking him to show me different ways that he'd speak to me. And so I ended up going through the whole store and nothing happened. I'm like, well, what is going on? Because I know it was him and I know there was for somebody there. Well, as soon as I stepped out of the store, there was a couple there with a boxer. And it actually wasn't a boxer, it was more of a,
You're asking the wrong. If you're looking at me,
it looked like a boxer, but wasn't a boxer. I can't
terrible
remember
with dogs.
what they said it was, and it's slipping me, but it's not important. The important thing was it was the dog that I was seeing. And I ended up having this great conversation with them about God, about they were believers, and I told them why I was approaching them, and we had this great conversation. There was nothing profound that happened with it, but what God was doing with that is He was showing me a way that He would speak to me. And in doing so, now when that happens, there's a very, very clear sense of, I know it's Him, because I now recognize the way He speaks to me in that imagery, whereas if it was just me thinking or processing, it probably wouldn't come across that way. And that's what I get most of the time. Most of the time it is a drawing to, or an impression, or a sense that a word may pop into my head, an image may pop into my head. I know when I got a word for someone recently, and it was, all I could see was this little kid shaking. And for me, that when I was a little kid, if you've ever seen the movie Goonies, right, and you do the truffle shuffle, right, and so that's what started coming into my head. Well, all of a sudden, I'm talking to this guy, and we start talking, and it ended up, he was a big Goonies fan. We had a great conversation, led to a conversation about God. It was great. But that's how he often speaks to me, is through imagery. Another time I think I told that last week. Did I tell that last week about Willow? I think so. I did. Yeah. So it's imagery. It's words. I have a couple tonight, or one I think tonight, that came from that as well. And I got an image of something, and that's what that. And we'll go through that.
Nice. Yeah.
The very first time I actually heard His audible voice, and I don't think this happens for everybody, I don't know because I'm not there sharing your experience, but I was saved at a youth conference when I was 15, and during the altar call, I heard, it felt like 1,000 voices just raise up in my head talking about how bad I was. I was an awful son, I was an awful kid, I was horrible, I was mean, all these things just running through me. It was horrible. And then I heard this small voice inside whisper and saying, Ryan, just come to me, it's okay. And it was soft, it was subtle, but it drowned out all the other voices. And so it was a weird experience, because I'd never really, if you have to realize how loud this was going on in my head, it was like there was 1,000 people in this room yelling at me about how bad, and I could hear each one of them individually. It was awful. But when He spoke, that soft voice, it drowned everybody else out, if that makes sense. And it obviously it changed my life. I'm here. So that was the first time. The second time, I was on my motorcycle going to work, and I was turning left onto Walker off of 100 and whatever road that is. It's like 173rd, I think. And I'm turning left onto Walker. Now you have to understand, this is a sports bike. It does 0 to 60 in 3.5 seconds. It's a very, very fast motorcycle, and
Sounds like fun. I'm just saying.
It's a lot of fun.
My wife won't let me get a motorcycle.
It was. I did a lot of really stupid things on that motorcycle, but the norm was I would sit and watch the light, and as the light turned yellow, I'd rev up the engine, and I would go the second that light turned green. And I'm revving up the engine, I look, no one's coming the other way, so I look this way, I see the light, and I hear this, Ryan, look again. And it was audible. It was like somebody was standing right next to me, and it scared the living life out of me, to the point where I did look again, and this lady saw her clear as day, made contact with her eyes, 60 miles an hour, blew the red light, I am 100% convinced that I would be dead right now if I'd gone. There's no protection for a motorcycle at that speed. Somebody hitting a side swipe like that, I would at least be probably paralyzed, if not dead. So it was important that he got my attention. I think that was the key there, that there was no time for imagery and me and guessing games. He called me out, and he obviously has had work for me to do. I've put a lot of time into this house. I put a lot of time into people, and so I think God also protects, we've talked with Justin a little bit, that God protects his investment. And so,
Yeah. I actually have a question about these instances when God spoke to you. Was this after 40 weeks of prayer and fasting and really intense time with God?
it was. No, not at all. In fact, the one time on the motorcycle, I was not engaged in him the way, anywhere near like I'm engaged with him now. I was, wasn't bad, but I was certainly playing on my motorcycle a lot and going out and drinking with friends, and so I mean I was different than I am now.
Right.
But but definitely not praying and fasting on a regular basis.
So, audible voice of God, and it wasn't at a time when you were, on your knees in your prayer closet after spending weeks on end fasting and reading the Word. I think the misconception that can sometimes happen in our minds is we get this idea that these people that hear from God are like super duper spiritual, and really, I don't think that's the case.
No, I would absolutely agree. I mean, I think there, how to say it the right way, there is benefit to fasting. You and I talk about that a lot.
Yes.
There is benefit to being in prayer and being in communion, but it's not a requirement. It's a benefit. It's a want. I want to fast. I want to be in his presence. I want to be with him. I think in the case where he talked to me on the motorcycle, it was a father not wanting his child to die. Right?
Yeah.
I mean, I don't think it was well, he's not praying to me, I'm just going to let him get hit. I mean, what kind of God would that be?
And I think we become more sensitive to the Holy Spirit when we do spend time in the Word and we pray and we fast, absolutely. But I think the point, because I know the story, so I'm cheating a little bit. Oopsies. Bad example for the children. Is that God's trying to get our attention all the time, and He's trying to speak to us. And sometimes we put up this wall, and that wall is, well, I'm not good enough, or that wall is, it's bricked with guilt, it's bricked with past regret, it's bricked with fear and anxiety, and that wall needs to come down, because even in the fear and anxiety and guilt and other things that can well up inside of our mind and build these, these strongholds against hearing the voice of God, He can break through all that, one. And two, just to give you an idea, like Brian was saying, he wasn't like in this super spiritual bubble in his life or something where everything was just perfect. It was at a time when, he was living a little selfishly. And God still broke through that and said, hey, I'm not going to let one of my children die. I'm going to step in because I've got things for you to do. And I know the person that you'll become, and I have a destiny for you. And I want you to be able to fulfill that. And He means that for everyone.
Absolutely, that's absolutely correct, and I think he really does that well for all his children. He wants that. The final time that I've audibly, I mean, it wasn't like in my head. It was like somebody was talking to me. It's a few years back. I was, my wife and I were having a good evening. I went upstairs to go to bed. She wanted to do some things, and I went upstairs. Went to bed, and got woke up by a voice in the middle of the night. And the voice said, "Ryan, where's Darwin?" And I kind of half woke up. I'm in a daze at this point. And I said, I don't know, she's probably still downstairs. And I rolled over to go back to sleep. And then even firmer, he said, no. And then when he said no, I went, wow, that's God talking to me. What's going on? Where's your wife? And I went, I don't know. And so I got up, and I went downstairs, and she was collapsed in the downstairs bathroom. And this is more of her story to tell, so I won't go into all the details and stuff, but she had overdosed on alcohol, actually. And when the paramedics arrived, and I did get her permission to share the story tonight, by the way. When the paramedics arrived, they said 3 to 5 more minutes and they wouldn't have been able to save her. She was in cardiac arrest. She was, her whole body was shutting down, and they tried giving her Narcan. It really didn't do anything because it's alcohol, which Narcan doesn't really affect alcohol that much. And so they got her semi-stabilized, took her to the hospital. But I also firmly believe that if God had not woke me up in the middle of the night, she would not be with us right now. So she is a testament to God's goodness. Her story, by the way, is just crazy, amazing. And she's still right down in the middle of it. So she actually brings a lot of inspiration for me. I have a lot of just respect for her faith. But God's amazing, and He's trustworthy, and you can trust Him with those things. So it's very hard for me, because of some of those situations, to just dismiss the fact that He's talking to me, but I do, and that's the really weird thing that I haven't really quite figured out, that I will get. Sorry, I keep getting you over there, you're in the dark. But I still get to points where I'm just like, oh, like God's forgotten about me, or you know, these weird places, and it's hard. It's like, how can you have had so much, so God reveal Himself so much and still have those doubts? And I think it's part of the walk that we're here to take. You know, I make mistakes. I say things that I shouldn't say. I do things that I shouldn't do. You know, Paul even said that, right? All through his walk. And so I think we have to remember that when we're trying to practice righteousness, which is what the Bible calls us to do, we are going to stumble. We're going to make mistakes. We're going to do and say really dumb things. But we have a Father and a Spirit that is leading us through life in a way to bless and touch other people. And I actually think we're going to come to the end. And when we stand in front of the judgment seat, and we stand in front of Christ and have to account for all the things that we've said, good and bad, I think He's going to show us places where we impacted others in a positive way that we just didn't know we did it. Simply saying hello to somebody who was about ready to kill themselves and acknowledging their existence. We just don't know. So I think it's important that we just walk out as much as we can, as often as we can, and do our best, and allow God to correct us and move us.
Yeah, I'd like to say just 2 things about that. One, you're absolutely right about it. You never know, if God leads you to say something to someone, it may not be to share, let's say, John 3:16 with that person, or to maybe not even to pray with them, but just give an encouraging word that may change the direction of their life. I love the story of Billy Graham, who goes to this crusade, and it's packed, and so he's going to leave with his friends, and this usher is like, no, I can find a place for you. He finds a place for him. This guy had no idea that was going to happen. He probably doesn't even realize it. Like, he might not even ever know, but that's the beauty of it, because if we're to stay humble and just do what God wants us to do, then we're not going to know every time what God's doing in people's lives, or how many lives that's going to affect, just as long as we're obedient in listening to God. So that's one. 2, in these situations where, you know, you feel maybe like you're not always, you hear God, but you're not always listening, if that makes sense.
Absolutely.
I would say, and you can tell me if you feel the same way, that I felt the same way, especially in the past, where when I first really started to pursue God, I would talk at Him instead of talk to Him. But as time goes on, I feel like I can hear Him better. I can understand what He's trying to say more, and I have a better understanding of the direction that He wants me to go. I still make the same mistakes of not always hearing or obeying like I should, but I would say that it gets easier as time goes on.
And I would say just be willing to take a chance too. There is an element of risk to go, well, am I just thinking that, or should I actually say something? And I told an individual, I think last time, during some conversation, conversation. It's like, if you feel like God's calling you to something and then you feel really uncomfortable to go do it, it's probably Him calling you to something. And I think that's a good indicator that when you start getting stressed, like, oh, I don't know if I should do it, maybe I shouldn't do it, oh, I don't know, I'm going to feel weird, I don't know, maybe it's not really Him talking. That's usually when it's time to step out, take a risk. If it's not really Him, you'll take a little thump, and then you'll learn to hear His voice a little clearer. And it's really those times where you start getting successes, and His speaking to you does bear some sort of fruit, either a relationship or someone's happiness, who you see somebody lift up just a little bit. There's a lot of things you can get from it. Then you go, that was God talking to me, and it sits in your memory. And then again, and then again, and then again, and then it becomes easier and easier to hear from Him, I think.
Yeah, I would agree.
So just keep trying. I mean, that's the base of my message, is just really, really asking, and He will honor your asking.
Now, did you have something for?
I do. I have two things. We're gonna have some fun tonight, if that's okay with everybody. We want to have a little fun. Okay.
No, this is
No?
church. I'm pretty sure fun is not allowed. I think
All right,
that's
you may-
the F word.
You may
So
go.
we can't do that in
You may
church.
go. The rest of us will have exciting time.